Hey kids, and welcome back to episode 3 of Window View, the podcast where I try to give you an OBS review with some substance and pretend like it's an original idea. Again, I'm your host, Window, and I hope everyone's doing okay out there. And today we're going to be taking a look at a game that's been stuck in my mind since its release in October of 2022. I originally played this one on Game Pass when it was released, and at the time I'd never finished it. Upon downloading and trying it, I was immediately sucked into this game totally by its aesthetic alone. A mix of retro futuristic cyberpunk with a dash of anime energy and a whole heaping lot of 90s survival horror mechanics. Signalis gripped me, and even though I never had finished it at the time, it never let go. I have since finished it. So let's see, I'm 37 at the time of this writing, so I was around 11 when Resident Evil 1 was released in 1996. I'm pretty sure my math is right on that one. I remember my older brother coming home with it from Blockbuster, popping it into the PS1 and turning out the lights. And we were just shocked and blown away and amazed at the graphics at the time. The FMVs, all of it. Nothing like this had ever been seen. And okay, granted, Alone in the Dark did come out in 1992, but we didn't know any of that back then. Moving on. As the years went on, we had Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and of course Silent Hill. All these came and went, and while they were all amazing, it seemed the interest for survival horror dwindled over the past few years until Dead Space came along. But go listen to episode 1 if you want to hear me rant about that for a while. And of course, with time, with the ways of slower gameplay, less action, more puzzles, and the like, the rise of stronger consoles and better graphics, more and more action rich gameplay began to make its way into games, and that kind of became the standard. Then RE4 had to come out in 2005 and fuck it up for everyone. So yeah, action goes well with horror, but it wasn't true survival horror like the old days, the 96 days, the PS1 days. When the limits of your controls and graphics made you actually struggle and actually left a lot more to your imagination. That's where Signalis steps in. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Gameplay. So when I say old school, classic, retro survival, what do you think? Tank controls, right? Limited inventory system? Well, you'd be 100% correct, but Signalis takes it a step further by introducing a top-down playstyle. I honestly feel this small company, Rose Engine, by the way, they only consist of 2 people. They need to be given the rights to do a Resident Evil game in this style. Freeform movement with the left analog stick, aim with L2 that performs a soft auto aim and allows you to slowly move, and fire with R2. It's a very simple style that's been used in other games before, but I feel like Signalis absolutely masters this. The gameplay is super smooth, with very few hiccups anywhere, and I never find myself really having a meltdown over the controls like I do in every version of RE4 out there, whether it be a port of the classic or the remake. Yes, y'all heard it here, folks. I think Signalis has better controls than RE4 remake. Big fucking shock, right? I said it. Gameplay and camera changes from room to room flow without problems. Quick access to a super stylized map and inventory system also help in the fight. The game also makes use of a radio mechanic where you need to use frequency to basically act as number stations to help you solve puzzles or even stop enemies. It's a very welcome system and adds a small layer to the gameplay that I don't feel overwhelmed by, not in the slightest. In fact, I welcome it. Overall, your classic survival horror items are all there: weapons, the inventory hokey pokey, healing items, feeling overwhelmed by lack of inventory space, running back and forth across the vast spaces of this game, hoping you have the ammo to deal with what you have left in the way just so you can dump off some ammo for a gun that you don't even have yet. It's all there. And it's all fantastic for me. The gameplay itself is very simple, but it's a welcome change of pace and return to form, and instead of more from the world of overcomplicated layers of game systems on top of game systems on top of game systems. And as far as anything involving story, I feel like anything I say would actually be a spoiler. This game is very much an experience that needs to be played. Hell, even watched if you want. Just dive in, see what it's all about. What I will say is if you're a fan of anything cyberpunk, Ghost in the Shell, Neon Genesis Evangelion, hell, even Gantz, then this game is worth a try for you. And I mean, at a price point of $20, you really don't have a lot to lose here. Every once in a while, a game comes along that reminds you of why you fell in love with a certain genre, or even gaming as a whole. Well, I feel like Signalis is one of those games. Let's go talk about controls. Now, the controls are what the RE1 HD release on PS4's updated controls should be. Now, in the RE1 remake on PS4, at least as far as the camera goes, I absolutely cannot get used to the free movement using an analog stick. Well, and that's mainly due to the camera angle changes and the controls altering slightly every time you enter a new room. It doesn't keep up. You enter a room holding the stick where you were heading, and as you change rooms, the direction will change. At least in my experience, every time I gave it an honest try, I always ended up back on tank controls. Sure, I know it's a fixed camera game compared to Signalis being top down, but they absolutely nailed the camera and movement. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. Movement from area to area is flawless. It's quick, it's responsive. And if you get jumped, it's your own damn fault. You have plenty of means to defend yourself, but granted, you have any items or bullets left. Multiple types of weapons and even defense weapons are littered throughout the dark corridors of Signalis and can be used at the press of a button once equipped. Very reminiscent of RE1 Remake. And if you find yourself having trouble while fighting a group of enemies, it's more than likely because the classic stun locking is a son of a bitch, and you forgot about it after not running into it for over a decade. So don't go running head first into a room like I usually do. Overall, the controls are tight, responsive, modern take on tank controls, and I can appreciate that, especially after not seeing them in a new game in what, 15, 20 years, some shit like that. Anyway, on to difficulty. Now, the difficulty has not been too much for me to handle with, thankfully. Where the difficulty lies in this game is your inventory management. Enemies that get back up unless you use a flare to burn them. Lack of ammo. And sometimes you can even pick up a box of ammo and it's got maybe 2 bullets in it. So between stuff like that and enemies that get back up and a big lack of flares to burn the bodies, it can be a bit much running back and forth to manage the small inventory, while the enemies do get back up on maybe your 3rd, 4th, or even your 5th run back through a corridor to drop items off in your stash. It's a game that reminds me, holy crap, how did we play and beat Resident Evil and Silent Hill as kids? It's a miracle that we did without the internet to guide us. Sure, we had EGM and GamePro magazines back then, but that shit was what, $5, $6 a pop back then, and I never had an allowance. Hell, some of us were and still are broke. But, that's neither here nor there. Now, as said before, the game clearly takes a lot of inspiration from RE1 Remake, with enemies that can be downed, that can get back up after a certain amount of time, and can be kept down permanently by burning them. While it is a great mechanic, I personally didn't use it very much. I found it too tedious and almost impossible to do, being I always had so much in my inventory that I had to use. Only towards the end of the game was starting to burn the enemies, even beneficial, but even then I had a shotgun and a high-powered revolver to help me, so burning them seemed like a bit of a waste. I have to play the game again on a higher difficulty to see how much the experience changes for me. Not really a complaint, game's still great, just, a mechanic I didn't use. So, on to a new section. And for the first time on Window View, I've actually added an art direction section here. We'll be doing this in the future for games that I feel stand out with their art and UI designs, etc. So, moving on. This game oozes aesthetic, overall style that I just cannot get enough of. I'm a huge fan of everything cyberpunk and retro, futuristic stuff, lo-fi, and this game scratches all the itches. From character and weapon designs, the UI, cutscenes with computer terminal art that I take tons of screenshots of, and those are actually now my computer wallpapers. It's got it all. Now, all of this is done in a retro pixelated fashion, but it's done so well I barely ever notice it's pixelated. The game itself has a retro CRT mode you can use, and frankly, if you're not playing in that mode, I don't know what you're doing with your life. It looks absolutely fantastic. Now, that bit was on script. This is a little bit unscripted right here. I haven't seen a game handle cyberpunk, retrofuturistic, lo-fi, combined it all in a package, nice little bow on it, and nail, all the terminal stuff. Because all that stuff is important. All those little details, like all the little UI, the computer DOS and stuff, like you gotta have that stuff. And Signalis just oozes it. Like the UI is just absolutely gorgeous. And even the heart monitor, if you flip over to the different windows for like your for your radio and notes and things like that. There's even like a little section that's got a heart monitor on it, and even that looks amazing. Just everything about the game and art just screams at me. And as great as the game is, that's one thing I can't get over. I always am thinking about the artwork in that game. But that's just me being an artist. I guess that's just kind of, you know, kind of something that just strikes me. So, moving on. And that brings us to our recommended unscripted section, where I only go off of a couple of pointers that I have written down here. But other than that, like, it's totally unscripted. This game reminds me of why I'm such a huge fan of old school survival horror. Yes, new school is pretty cool. Don't get me wrong. I like RE Remake. I like the Dead Space remake. You know, I like some newer stuff that's out there. But man, old school survival horror is where it's at. I just I just can't get over that shit. Like, this game seriously screams at you, hey, remember back when, Leon wasn't suplexing people? Like, it's so good. It just reminds me of a time when, you kind of had to rely on your imagination for things. You had what I find amazing is here, like, you hear this, y'all hear this paper? Those are the physical notes I've had to take down playing Signalis. Like, if you watch the stream or if you go onto YouTube and watch it, you can watch me sit there and I'm writing notes. And honestly, that's something I miss from back in the day. You don't do that so much anymore. Now it's like, oh, well, here's the catalog of stuff that's, you're doing. Here's your objective. In the case of Dead Space, you just hold a button, and Isaac puts his hand out. The objective beacon points you where you need to go. Well, yes, it's cool. They're cool quality of life adjustments. And the way they're done in Dead Space, it feels very friendly to the lore and the world. I still miss doing stuff like that. Taking notes, writing all that kind of stuff down. It playing the entirety of Signalis really did make me miss playing old school games. So as of this recording, we are on 7/24/23. I'm going to be starting Silent Hill on PlayStation sometime soon. So that's going to be a trip to go back to playing that. And we're going to be playing on a real hardware too, so that's going to be super interesting. Um, but yeah, as great as Resident Evil 4 is, as great as the remake is, y'all have seen me on the stream. Y'all have heard me bitch about it constantly. I have a goddamn heart attack with the controls. The game pisses me off constantly. As great as they are, I always have problems with them. And to me, like, Resident Evil 4 really was that bridge. Of course, from RE3, which was like kind of like the last classic um, survival horror game in my memory. Well, I mean, aside from like Silent Hill 2. Um, okay, Silent Hill 3, I'm sorry. Like, those are like the last like games that were like that, kind of, the whole time period. I don't know which ones came out first or which ones didn't. So forgive me if I, getting those dates wrong. But, after that little area of time, RE3, Silent Hill 2, Resident Evil 4, that was it. 4 was like the end all be all. And for many, it still is. Of course, like we've always said, I've had my problems with it. But it's very cool to see this indie studio of fucking two people make a love letter to old school survival horror. The game is fucking fantastic. And do I recommend it? I absolutely recommend it. Y'all can hear me talking. I am huge advocate of this game. I hope that for some damn reason we get a sequel. I don't know how they would do one. Because like I said, I seriously cannot say anything about the story. If you're interested in the story, do a search for yourself, look it up on YouTube, or just buy the game. It's only $20. $20 for that kind of gameplay, art design style, everything that was put into that is a fucking bargain. So do yourself a favor, buy the fucking game. It is fantastic. I'm going to shut up now. And that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Window View. I want to thank everybody out there for, searching me, finding me, watching me, listening to me, whatever it is. Thank you. I appreciate every one of you. So go check me out on Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, pretty much everywhere there's a social at Dr. Window. That's DOKTORWINDO. Thank you all once again for listening, and I will catch you all next time. So see y'all around.